Pay attention to the silver Honda Accord heading west on Route 422. It's 11:47 p.m. On October 14th, 2023, the vehicle has an expired registration sticker, 32 days overdue, a minor violation, the kind that happens every day. Officer Derek Masterson of the Franklin Township Police Department activates his lights. The Honda pulls over immediately. No hesitation. No attempt to flee. The driver puts the vehicle in park, hands visible on the steering wheel. Textbook compliance. The man behind the wheel is Christopher Vale. He's 41 years old, a former paramedic, divorced, currently employed as a medical supply courier. He lives alone in a modest ranch house in Greenfield. His driving record shows 2 speeding tickets in the past decade. Nothing remarkable. Officer Masterson approaches the driver's side window. Vale has his license and registration ready. He's polite, apologetic about the expired tags. He explains he's been meaning to renew them, but work has been demanding. His story is reasonable. His demeanor is calm. But Masterson notices something. Vale's hands are trembling slightly. Not unusual during a traffic stop. Many people get nervous around police. But there's something else. Vale keeps glancing at the rearview mirror. Not at Masterson, at something behind him, at the back seat. Masterson asks Vale to step out of the vehicle. Vale complies immediately. Too immediately. He exits the car and stands by the driver's door, hands at his sides. He's wearing scrubs, consistent with his job in medical supply. His shoes are pristine white sneakers, recently cleaned. Almost compulsively so. Masterson explains he's going to do a quick check of the vehicle for safety purposes. Vale nods. He doesn't object, doesn't ask why, doesn't invoke his rights. He simply stands there, watching. The officer approaches the passenger side with his flashlight. The back seat is empty, clean, almost too clean. No fast food wrappers, no receipts, no personal items. The kind of cleanliness that takes effort. Deliberate effort. Then, Masterson sees it. On the floor behind the driver's seat, partially obscured by the seat itself, a woman's black, high-heeled shoe, size 7. The heel is broken. Masterson's training kicks in immediately. He asks Vale about the shoe. Vale explains it belongs to a friend. She left it in his car last week after they went to dinner. A simple explanation. Delivered without emotion. But Masterson notices something else now. In the back passenger footwell, just visible in the flashlight beam. Dark stains on the gray carpet. Recent stains, still slightly damp. The officer returns to his patrol vehicle and requests backup. Vale stands beside his Honda, perfectly still. He doesn't ask questions, doesn't demand to know what's happening. He simply waits. Hands in his pockets, eyes on the ground. Within 8 minutes, 2 additional units arrive. Officers conduct a more thorough search of the vehicle. They open the trunk. A woman is inside. Her name is Amber Sutton. She's 29 years old, a dental hygienist from Millbrook. She's bound with zip ties at her wrists and ankles. Duct tape covers her mouth. She's wearing jeans and a burgundy sweater. Her other black high-heeled shoe is still on her left foot. She's alive, but just barely. Her eyes are wide with terror. Her breathing is shallow and rapid. There's a bruise forming on her left temple. Her lips beneath the tape are cracked and bleeding. She's been in that trunk for hours. Officer Masterson calls for an ambulance immediately. He removes the tape from Amber's mouth as gently as possible. She gasps for air. She can barely speak. She's severely dehydrated, hypothermic, and in shock. Christopher Vale is placed in handcuffs. He doesn't resist, doesn't speak. His expression never changes. He simply watches as paramedics load Amber Sutton into an ambulance, and then he's guided into the back of a patrol car. The traffic stop that began as a routine registration check at 11:47 p.m. has become a kidnapping investigation by 12:09 a.m. But this was only the beginning. Amber Sutton had last been seen 47 hours earlier. She'd left her apartment in Millbrook at 6:15 p.m. on October 12th, heading to the Riverside Fitness Center for her regular Thursday evening yoga class. She'd texted her roommate, Jenna Kovac, from the parking lot, "Running late but made it. See you at 9." She never came home. Jenna reported her missing at 11:30 p.m. that same night. Amber always communicated. Always. When her phone went to voicemail and then stopped ringing entirely, Jenna knew something was catastrophically wrong. The Millbrook Police Department began investigating immediately. They pulled security footage from the fitness center. The cameras showed Amber arriving at 6:22 p.m. She'd parked her silver Toyota Camry in the third row. She'd grabbed her yoga mat from the back seat. She'd walked toward the building entrance, but she never made it inside. At 6:24 p.m., a figure approached her from behind. Male, average height, wearing dark clothing and a baseball cap. The footage showed him speaking to her. Amber turned. The interaction appeared brief, 30 seconds at most. Then, Amber collapsed. The man caught her before she hit the pavement. He supported her weight, guiding her back toward her own vehicle. To anyone watching from a distance, it might have looked like he was helping an ill friend to her car. The body language was careful, practiced. He placed her in the passenger seat of her Camry. Then he got into the driver's seat and drove away. The entire sequence took less than 2 minutes. Amber's car was found 3 days later in a shopping center parking lot in Greenfield, 12 miles from the fitness center. It had been wiped clean. No fingerprints, no DNA, no physical evidence. But now, with Vale in custody, investigators had their suspect, and they had questions. The interrogation began at 2:30 a.m. on October 15th at the Franklin Township Police Department. Detective Sarah Brennan led the questioning. She'd been with the department for 11 years and had worked dozens of abduction cases. She knew the patterns. She knew the lies. She knew when someone was holding back. Christopher Vale sat across from her in the interview room. He'd requested a lawyer, but before the attorney arrived, he made one statement. He wanted to explain. The interrogation lasted 7 hours. Vale's story was methodical and disturbing. He described the planning, the surveillance, the drug he'd used, a veterinary sedative he'd obtained through his medical supply contacts. He explained how he'd approached Amber in the parking lot, pretending to be a fitness center employee, warning her about car break-ins in the area. While she was distracted, he'd administered the sedative using a modified auto-injector concealed in his hand. He described driving her Camry to the shopping center, transferring her to his Honda, and leaving her vehicle behind. He explained that he'd kept her at his house for 2 days in a soundproofed room in the basement. His nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile away. No one heard anything. Detective Brennan asked the obvious question: why? Vale's answer was clinical. He said he was lonely. He said he wanted companionship. He said he thought if he kept someone long enough, they would understand that he wasn't going to hurt them, that they would stay willingly. The detective then asked the question that changed everything. Was Amber the first? Vale looked at his hands. The handcuffs clinked softly against the metal table. He was silent for 43 seconds. Then he said no. She was the fourth. The search of Christopher Vale's property began at dawn on October 15th. The house was a single-story ranch on 2 acres of wooded land. Unremarkable from the outside. Well-maintained lawn. Neutral gray siding. A small garden with late-season tomatoes still on the vine. The kind of house that wouldn't draw a second glance from anyone driving past. Inside was a different story. The basement had been modified. The walls were lined with soundproofing foam. A heavy steel door had been installed at the bottom of the stairs, complete with industrial locks. The room beyond contained a twin bed with restraints attached to the frame. There was a chemical toilet in the corner. Bottles of water, protein bars, a bucket, and there were personal items. Investigators cataloged them carefully. A silver bracelet engraved with the name Heather. A student ID card for Westfield Community College belonging to Carla Mendez. A pair of prescription eyeglasses in a leopard print case. A cell phone with a cracked screen. The wallpaper showed a young woman with red hair and freckles. The digital forensics team examined Vale's computers and phones. They found surveillance photos, dozens of them. Women photographed without their knowledge. at grocery stores, coffee shops, gas stations. The images were organized into folders. Each folder had a woman's name. Some folders contained detailed notes about routines, schedules, places of employment. There were 11 folders total. 4 of the folders had red check marks next to them. Investigators began the grim work of matching the belongings to missing persons cases. The bracelet belonged to Heather Sinclair. She was 32 years old, a nurse at Greenfield Memorial Hospital. She'd been reported missing on March 8, 2023, 7 months earlier. She'd vanished after finishing a night shift. Her car had been found in the hospital parking garage. The case had gone cold within weeks. The student ID belonged to Carla Mendez. She was 23 years old, studying radiology at Westfield Community College. She disappeared on June 3, 2023, after leaving her evening class. Her backpack had been found near a bus stop. No witnesses, no leads. The eyeglasses belonged to Nina Albright. She was 27 years old, an accountant. She'd been reported missing on August 19, 2023. She'd left her office at 5:30 p.m. for a dental appointment that she never made it to. Her vehicle had been found abandoned on a rural road with the keys still in the ignition. 3 women, 3 unsolved disappearances spanning 7 months, all within a 30-mile radius of Greenfield, all abducted and held in Christopher Vale's basement. Detective Brennan asked Vale directly, "Where are they now?" Vale's attorney advised him not to answer, but Vale, for reasons investigators still don't fully understand, chose to speak anyway. He provided locations, detailed locations. The search teams mobilized immediately. Heather Sinclair's remains were found on October 16th in a wooded area off County Road 47. She'd been buried in a shallow grave approximately 3 feet deep. The medical examiner determined she'd died from blunt force trauma to the head. Time of death, approximately 4 months prior. Vale would later claim it was an accident, that Heather had tried to escape, that there'd been a struggle, that he'd panicked. Carla Mendez's remains were discovered on October 17th near a creek bed in Fletcher State Forest. She'd been deceased for approximately 3 months. Cause of death, asphyxiation. Vale stated she'd become ill while in his custody. He said he'd tried to help her, but she'd stopped breathing. He said he'd panicked again. Nina Albright's remains were found on October 18th in a drainage culvert beneath an overpass. She'd been deceased for 6 weeks. Cause of death, dehydration, and organ failure. Vale claimed he'd been called away for work unexpectedly. He said when he returned 3 days later, she was unresponsive. He said he'd meant to bring her water. 3 women who should still be alive. 3 families who'd spent months in agonizing uncertainty, hoping for a miracle. 3 cold cases that were now closed in the worst possible way. Amber Sutton was Vale's 4th victim. She was also his only survivor. Amber spent 4 days in Riverside Medical Center recovering from her ordeal. She was treated for dehydration, hypothermia, minor abrasions, and severe psychological trauma. She'd lost 12 pounds in 47 hours. Her wrists and ankles bore deep bruising from the zip ties. The injury to her temple required 7 stitches. But physically, she would recover. The psychological impact was far more complex. Amber experienced nightmares, panic attacks, and severe anxiety. She couldn't be in enclosed spaces without becoming overwhelmed. The sound of a car trunk opening would trigger immediate physiological responses. She'd lost her sense of safety in the world. She couldn't return to work for 3 months. She moved out of her apartment. Too many memories of that last normal evening. She underwent intensive trauma therapy. Her insurance covered 12 sessions. She needed far more than that. The detective assigned to her case, Sarah Brennan, stayed in contact. She provided updates on the investigation. She connected Amber with victim services. She attended every court hearing alongside her. Professional boundaries blurred slightly, but Brennan understood that Amber needed someone in law enforcement she could trust, someone who wouldn't abandon her once the case closed. Amber would later describe Brennan as the person who helped her believe in a system that had nearly failed her. If Officer Masterson hadn't noticed that shoe, if backup hadn't arrived quickly, If Vale had been released with just a warning about his registration, she would have become victim number 4 in a very different way. Christopher Vale's trial began on March 4, 2024. He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of kidnapping, 1 count of attempted murder, and 1 count of kidnapping in Amber Sutton's case. Additional charges included evidence tampering, possession of controlled substances, and multiple counts of stalking. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: the surveillance photos, the modified basement, the personal belongings of the victims, Vale's own confession, Amber's testimony, the digital trail showing months of predatory planning. The defense attempted to argue diminished capacity. Vale's childhood had been difficult: a mother with severe mental illness, an absent father, multiple foster homes. His attorney painted a picture of a man damaged by trauma, someone who'd never learned healthy interpersonal connections. They brought in psychiatric experts who diagnosed him with attachment disorders and antisocial personality traits. The prosecution didn't dispute Vale's troubled past. They acknowledged the trauma. They recognized the psychological factors. But they emphasized one critical point: premeditation. Vale had planned these abductions meticulously. He'd modified his home specifically to hold women captive. He'd researched sedatives. He'd developed a system. Trauma might explain behavior. It doesn't justify it. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. Christopher Vale was found guilty on all counts. The verdict was read on March 28, 2024. Vale showed no emotion. He sat motionless as each guilty verdict was announced. 14 times the word guilty filled the courtroom. Sentencing occurred 4 weeks later. The judge sentenced Vale to life in prison without the possibility of parole on each of the 3 murder charges. The sentences would run consecutively. Additionally, he received 50 years for the kidnapping of Amber Sutton and 20 years each for the other kidnapping charges. Vale would die in prison. There was no mathematical possibility of release. Before the judge closed the hearing, she addressed Vale directly. She acknowledged his difficult past. She recognized that he was a product of a system that had failed him as a child. But she emphasized that thousands of people experience childhood trauma without becoming predators. She stated that his choices, each calculated choice he'd made, had destroyed families and stolen futures. Then she turned to Amber Sutton, who was seated in the gallery. The judge commended her courage. She acknowledged that Amber's survival and testimony had been instrumental in ensuring justice not just for herself, but for 3 women who couldn't speak for themselves. She expressed hope that Amber would find healing and peace. Amber didn't speak. She simply nodded once. That was enough. The families of Heather Sinclair, Carla Mendez, and Nina Albright finally had answers. Not the answers they'd prayed for, not the miracle of finding their daughters alive, but closure of a kind. The terrible certainty of knowing, the ability to hold funerals, to bury their loved ones, to begin the long process of grieving properly. Heather's parents established the Heather Sinclair Foundation in her memory. The organization provides support and resources to families of missing persons, particularly during the critical first 72 hours when most cases are solved. They advocate for better training for law enforcement in recognizing patterns of predatory behavior. Carla's family created a scholarship in her name at Westfield Community College. It's awarded annually to a student pursuing a career in healthcare or public service. The scholarship has supported 14 students so far. Carla had wanted to become a radiologic technologist. Others would fulfill that dream in her honor. Nina's sister, Justine, became an advocate for workplace safety. She pushed for legislation requiring employers to verify that employees reach their destination safely when leaving work after dark. Nina had left her office alone at 5:30 p.m. No one thought to check whether she'd made it to her dental appointment. Justine wanted to change that culture of assumption. 3 women who had futures, who had families who loved them, who had dreams they would never realize. Their names are remembered. Their stories are told. They are more than victims. They were people who mattered. Amber Sutton continues her recovery. She still attends therapy weekly. She's returned to work, though she had to change dental practices. Her old office was too close to where Vale had been arrested. Too many memories of that night. She drives a different route home now. She never takes Route 422. She doesn't do yoga anymore. The fitness center where she was taken has been demolished and replaced with a medical office building. But even if it still existed, she couldn't go back. Some spaces hold too much weight. She's become an advocate in her own right. She speaks at law enforcement trainings about the victim's perspective. She emphasizes the importance of those small observations, the broken shoe, the damp carpet stains, the trembling hands. Officer Masterson had noticed. His noticing had saved her life. She's also worked with legislators on increasing penalties for kidnapping and creating better protections for victims during court proceedings. She wants the legal system to recognize that surviving is only the first step. Recovery takes years. Support can't end when the trial does. Amber gave a statement on the one-year anniversary of her abduction. She said she'd lost something in that trunk that she would never fully recover. Her ability to trust that the world is fundamentally safe. But she'd also gained something, the knowledge that she was stronger than she'd believed possible, that she could survive darkness and find light again. She said she thinks about Heather, Carla, and Nina often. She wonders what they would have become, what they would have achieved. She carries them with her. She survives for all four of them. Officer Derek Masterson received a commendation for his actions during the traffic stop. The award recognized his keen observation skills and adherence to protocol. But Masterson himself struggles with what happened that night. He thinks about the 12-minute window between stopping Vale's vehicle and requesting backup. He wonders what would have happened if he'd simply issued a warning and let Vale drive away. He also thinks about timing. Vale was pulled over at 11:47 p.m. If Masterson had been on a different patrol route, if he'd been handling another call, if Vale had driven a different highway, Amber Sutton would likely have died in that trunk. The randomness haunts him. But he also knows this: training matters. Observation matters. Taking that extra moment to look carefully, to trust your instincts, to ask questions. That broken shoe on the floor had been barely visible, but it had been enough. Masterson now speaks at the police academy. He uses the Vale case as a teaching example. He emphasizes that routine stops are never truly routine. That small details matter. That trusting your gut can mean the difference between a warning and a rescue. The silver Honda Accord is in evidence storage. It will likely remain there for years, possibly decades, should any appeals require access to the original crime scene. The vehicle is ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of car that passes by thousands of times each day without anyone noticing. That's what made it perfect for Christopher Vale's purposes. Invisibility, normalcy, the predator hidden in plain sight. Until Officer Derek Masterson noticed an expired registration sticker. The case changed how multiple police departments in the region approach traffic stops. Training protocols now emphasize looking beyond the immediate reason for the stop. Officers are taught to observe passenger behavior, vehicle cleanliness, unusual items, signs of distress. They're encouraged to trust their instincts when something feels wrong. A database was also created to track patterns of disappearances within specific geographic regions. The software flags similarities in victim profiles, locations, and methods. It's designed to identify serial predators earlier, before the body count rises. The system is named the Heather Alert Protocol, in memory of Heather Sinclair, Vale's first victim. It's been adopted by 43 police departments across the state. It has already led to 3 early interventions in suspected abduction cases. Change born from tragedy. Prevention built on the graves of those who couldn't be saved. Christopher Vale remains incarcerated at Morgantown Correctional Facility. He's held in protective custody due to the nature of his crimes. He receives no visitors. He writes no letters. He has filed no appeals. According to prison officials, he's a model inmate, quiet, compliant, keeps to himself. He spends most of his time in the prison library. He reads extensively. Medical journals, psychology texts, biographies of other criminals. Authorities monitor his reading materials carefully. In one interview conducted by a forensic psychologist studying serial offenders, Vale was asked if he felt remorse. He stated that he understood what he'd done was wrong. He acknowledged the suffering he'd caused. But when pressed on whether he felt genuine remorse, he couldn't answer. He said he didn't know what that felt like. The psychologist's assessment: Vale possesses significant psychopathic traits including shallow affect, lack of empathy, and failure to form genuine emotional connections. He understands morality intellectually, but doesn't experience it emotionally. His compliance in prison isn't evidence of reform. It's evidence of pragmatism. He will never be released. That is the only protection society has from him. A minor traffic violation, an expired registration sticker 32 days overdue, the kind of thing that happens thousands of times every day. A routine stop, a warning, move along. Except Officer Derek Masterson looked carefully. He noticed the trembling hands, the too clean vehicle, the broken shoe, the damp stains. He trusted his training and his instincts. And because he did, Amber Sutton is alive. 4 women, 3 are mourned, 1 survived. The difference came down to observation, timing, one officer's decision to look more closely at something that seemed just slightly wrong. The silver Honda Accord sits in an evidence locker now, silent, still, a monument to the danger that can exist in the most ordinary places. A reminder that evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it pulls over immediately when the lights flash. Sometimes it's polite and apologetic. Sometimes it looks exactly like everyone else, until someone notices what's hidden just out of sight. Amber Sutton has a new car now. She doesn't drive silver Hondas anymore. She doesn't drive silver or anything. Her car is bright red. Visible, impossible to overlook. She wants to be seen. She refuses to disappear again.